The sun hung low on the horizon, bleeding orange and purple into the sky like molten paint spilled across the endless mountains. A soft, cold wind whispered through the tall pines as Jake, Sam, Emma, Lily, and Chris trudged along the narrow dirt trail, their backpacks heavy, their boots crunching on loose gravel and dry leaves. The scent of damp earth mixed with pine resin, sharp and fresh against the cool mountain air. Birdsong faded as they climbed higher. Crickets began their low, rhythmic chorus, and somewhere deep in the woods, the occasional hoot of an owl echoed. The trail curved around boulders and thin mist began to gather near the roots of trees, giving the woods an almost floating, dreamlike appearance. Jake, always the one to set the pace, glanced at the map on his phone, only to frown as the signal blinked out. "Looks like we're off the grid," he muttered, half annoyed, half thrilled. Sam laughed, slapping his shoulder. "Perfect, no work emails. Just us and the wilderness." Emma, breathing steadily but looking a little pale, smiled weakly. "It's beautiful out here. I wish I could just pause time." Lily's eyes sparkled. "This is the real adventure. No distractions." She pointed to a distant ridge where jagged rocks stood like dark teeth against the fading light. Chris, always the quiet one, looked around as if memorizing every curve of the trees, the way shadows stretched like fingers over moss-covered stones. As dusk settled, a faint sound of water trickling down rocks joined the night symphony. The air grew colder, and a faint metallic tang mixed with pine and moss. The group huddled together at a clearing, unpacking energy bars and water bottles, their laughter echoing briefly before being swallowed by the forest's hush. The trail wound deeper into the woods, narrower and rougher. The sun disappeared fully, replaced by a pale crescent moon. The path suddenly opened up to a ridge road, and there it stood, the Hollow Ridge Motel. It appeared out of nowhere, a long, low building with peeling white paint, rust stains streaking its walls like frozen tears. The sign, half hanging from a cracked post, read Hollow Ridge Motel in faded red letters, some missing altogether. The parking lot was empty except for patches of weeds pushing through cracked asphalt. A single lamp near the entrance flickered with an amber glow, buzzing faintly. The air felt heavier here, as if it carried the weight of old secrets. A wooden bench sat beside the entrance, its planks warped. The windows, curtained but dark, reflected their silhouettes back at them like watchers in the night. "Looks deserted," Sam quipped, stepping closer, "like something out of a horror movie." "Let's just crash here for the night," Jake decided. "Better than hiking in the dark." As they stepped inside, the smell hit them first, a mix of dust, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like iron and blood. The carpet was threadbare, its dull red pattern stained and faded. The walls were lined with framed, cracked photographs of landscapes, rivers, forests, mountains, but oddly, none showed people. The lobby desk sat empty, covered with a fine layer of dust. A register book lay open, its pages yellowed, filled with names and dates stretching back decades. A handwritten note near the phone read, "Please stay inside after dark. Hollow Ridge cares for its guests." Emma's eyes lingered on the note, lips parted in silent worry. Lily laughed it off. "It's probably just some old joke." They picked room 12, a narrow space with 2 twin beds, a squeaky ceiling fan, and a cracked mirror mounted above a wooden dresser. The air was cooler here, almost unnaturally so, and the smell of dust and dampness lingered like a faint warning. Outside the window, the night stretched endlessly. The wind rattled loose shutters like whispered voices. Somewhere deep in the woods, a wolf howled, long and mournful, and the friends exchanged glances, the earlier laughter fading into silence. The group had unpacked, eaten their simple dinner, canned beans and granola, and stretched out across the narrow motel room. The ceiling fan whirred, though the air remained cold. Outside, the silence deepened as night fell fully. For a while, they talked, laughing softly as fatigue loosened their guarded expressions. Sam, sprawled on his bed, smirked at the room's emptiness. "Best camping trip ever," he grinned. "No people, no traffic, just us and the wilderness. What more could you ask for?" Lily, half laying against the wall, grinned back. "Yeah, it's kinda cool. Creepy vibes and all." Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, hugging her knees, eyes flickering toward the dark hallway outside the door. "I don't know. I feel like something's watching." Jake noticed but didn't respond at first. "It's just the nerves. We're exhausted." We'll sleep it off. Chris, sitting by the window, notebook in hand, quietly scribbled something before speaking. Even if it's nothing, something about this place, it feels off, like the air's thicker. His voice was calm, but heavier than usual. The first strange moment, around midnight, the silence broke. A sudden creak echoed down the hallway outside their room. Long, deliberate, like a floorboard under weight. Everyone froze. Sam's eyes darted toward the door. Probably just the old building settling, he whispered, though his smirk faltered. Then, barely a moment later, a faint whisper rose. Soft, broken syllables in no clear language, like breath against glass. The sound slipped through the doorframe like mist. Emma's eyes widened. She clutched Jake's arm. "Did you hear that?" Lily, trying to be bold, whispered, "It's probably the wind." But none of them moved. The ceiling fan's shadow flickered across the walls, distorting shapes, making the corners dance in the low light. A glimpse in the mirror later, as they attempted to settle in, Emma excused herself to splash water on her face in the tiny bathroom. The overhead light buzzed erratically, dimming and flaring as if breathing. As she leaned over the sink, the cracked mirror seemed to ripple. For a split second, she caught sight of a pale figure standing behind her. Not a clear face, just a hollow shape, blurred at the edges. She spun around. No one was there. The hallway stretched empty, bathed in soft moonlight. Her breath hitched. I saw something," she whispered when she rejoined the group. Jake, trying to calm her, shrugged, but his jaw tightened. "Hallucination. You're tired. We're all on edge." Sam chuckled nervously. "Yeah, you've been reading too many scary stories on your phone." But Chris didn't laugh. His pen hovered above his notebook, eyes narrowing. I think I saw something too, just before lights flickered." He hesitated, then added, "Maybe it's the wiring." Lily crossed her arms but avoided eye contact. "I'm going to explore the hallway a bit. See what's out there." Her attempt at bravery cracked when she stepped outside the door. The corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, the carpet dark with patches, the flickering bulbs above casting long, wavering shadows. As she walked, she felt the temperature drop sharply. A soft sobbing rose from the far end, quiet, broken, like someone holding back tears. Lily froze, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. Hash a locked door and faded photographs. The next morning, after a restless, fragmented sleep, the group gathered in the lobby. Dust motes danced in the golden light pouring through the dusty windows. The smell of damp wood and mildew clung to everything. There, along the walls, they discovered rows of photographs. Landscapes of mountains and lakes, but all eerily devoid of human presence. Emma, brushing her fingers over the frame, whispered, "Why? No people in any of these pictures." Jake scanned the frames, frowning. "It's odd, almost as if people avoided being here." Near the back desk, they noticed a half-open door leading to the basement stairs. Chris's eyes lit up. "I want to see what's down there." Sam, uneasy, shook his head. "No way. This place is sketchy enough." But curiosity pulled at them like gravity. They hesitated until Lily, without waiting for permission, pushed the door wider. The stairs below were narrow, damp, and smelled of mold and rust. At the bottom, they found a heavy, locked door with chains wrapped around it. Beside it lay scattered papers, brittle, yellowing, stained with dark blotches. Jake picked one up, carefully brushing dust away. His eyes widened as he read aloud, open quote, "Travelers missing, bodies never found. Hollow Ridge claimed them." Close quote. A chill shot through them. The locked door seemed to breathe in the silence. The basement door, heavy chains dangling loosely around it, sat like an ominous eye at the end of the hallway. Even after stepping back into their room, the door haunted their thoughts. The motel's walls seemed to hum softly, like something breathing in its sleep. Lingering in the lobby. The group didn't speak much after reading the old newspaper clippings and touching the symbols. The hallway's silence wrapped itself around them, thick and suffocating. Emma kept glancing toward the basement door, hugging her knees on the couch. It's wrong," she whispered. "I feel like it's watching us." Lily forced a smile, but her eyes darted around. "It's probably just old wiring and imagination. We shouldn't let it get into our heads." Sam, tapping his foot, tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe it's haunted. But I'm fine with ghosts, as long as they don't want coffee at 3 a.m. Only Jake didn't laugh. His jaw was tight, eyes narrowed as he stared at the locked door. "We shouldn't mess with it," he said firmly. "We don't know what's inside." Chris, standing near the dusty bookshelf, lowered his voice. Or maybe that's exactly why it's locked. The photographs that don't fit. Drawn by curiosity, they began inspecting the framed photographs lining the walls more closely. Each one was of a landscape, mountains, streams, desert plains, but something about them felt wrong. In one photograph, the lake's surface reflected a sky full of stars, but the stars seemed arranged like strange, jagged symbols. In another, a forest's trees appeared twisted unnaturally, their branches bending toward a center point as if trying to grab the space around them. In a third frame, the shoreline stretched endlessly into fog, but a faint, pale figure stood far in the distance, almost too small to notice, staring toward them. Lily squinted. Look at this one. It's like the trees are reaching. Emma's breath hitched. I thought I saw someone in that lake. Sam, trying to deflect, snorted. You're seeing ghosts in every puddle. But as they leaned closer, the feeling didn't leave. Their skin crawled. Even Jake's protective stance wavered. The cold corridor. Later, while searching for extra blankets, Lily wandered down the hallway, flashlight in hand. The air seemed to thicken with each step, and an unnatural chill crawled up her spine. The carpet, already worn thin, felt damp beneath her boots. The walls seemed to lean in, squeezing the hallway tighter. As she reached the halfway point, her flashlight flickered violently, plunging her into near darkness for a brief second. When it came back on, the hallway looked subtly different. Shadows seemed deeper, corners darker, and the end closer than it should be. A faint click sounded behind her. She spun around. Nothing. But her eyes caught movement. A door at the far end of the hallway appeared slightly ajar, though when she reached it, it was tightly shut, the brass handle cold as ice when she touched it. The whisper. That night, after dinner, the group sat close together in the lobby. The silence between them stretched like a taut wire. Without warning, a whisper rose from somewhere near the basement door. Not loud, barely a breath, but unmistakable. Come. The words slithered through the air like fog. Emma's eyes filled with tears instantly. Did you hear that? Sam froze, his smile gone. I don't know. Jake's muscles tightened. No one's there. But as he spoke, the flickering lamp near the desk sputtered and went out, plunging the lobby into darkness. The smell hit them next, acrid like something burnt mixed with wet earth. A sudden flash. The overhead lights buzzed back on, but for a split second the room seemed to flash, as if a scene from another time had intruded. For a breathless moment, each of them saw the lobby filled with shadowy figures, hunched shapes draped in black, their faces pale and hollow, mouths stretched wide in silent screams. The vision vanished as quickly as it appeared. Jake rubbed his eyes furiously. No, that can't be. Emma sobbed softly, burying her face in her hands. Lily clenched her jaw, trembling. Chris's pencil fell from his hand. The feeling of being watched later, unable to sleep, Sam stepped into the hallway to use the vending machine. As he approached the basement door, the air turned icy. His breath fogged in front of him. He placed his hand against the door. For a brief instant, he felt pressure, as if something on the other side was pressing back against it. His eyes flew wide. The door's paint seemed to quiver. He stumbled back, staring in shock, heart pounding. The locked door's silent invitation. The chains hanging loosely seemed to sway, though no breeze stirred them. The handwritten note at the desk, "Please stay inside after dark. Hollow Ridge cares for its guests," now seemed more like a warning than a suggestion. The motel, once just an abandoned roadside stop, now felt alive, a silent predator waiting to consume them. The group's nerves had frayed after the basement whispers, cold corridors, and fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures. Their eyes were hollow from lack of sleep, and fear hung thick in the air like smoke. The decision to leave morning came slowly, heavy with the smell of damp earth and stale air. The pale sunlight struggled through the thin curtains, casting ghostly stripes across the beds. Jake stood by the window, jaw clenched. His fingers tapped the sill nervously. "We're leaving today," he said firmly. No arguments. Emma, pale and shaken, nodded immediately. "Yes, please, I can't stay another night." Lily, eyes red from crying, whispered, I don't want to see that door again." Sam, slumping against the wall, forced a grin, but his hands trembled. Fine, let's get out of here." Chris, who had barely slept, rubbed his temples. It's like this place feeds on fear. For once, no one argued. They packed quickly, dragging bags over the cold floor. Their breaths steamed in the air as if the motel's chill had seeped into their bones. The weather turns. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered thick and low, rolling across the mountains like ink poured from the sky. The air smelled of ozone and wet stone. The first fat drops of rain splashed against the cracked windows like slow, deliberate knocks. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the valley, deep and warning. The group loaded their gear into their vehicle, a dusty old SUV parked near the entrance. The engine coughed but didn't start. Jake's hands flew over the keys, checking under the hood, but everything looked intact. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like fingers drumming in impatience. Lightning split the sky, white-hot veins illuminating the motel's decaying exterior. The shadows leapt and twisted in the flashes. Jake, biting his lip, growled, "Come on! Start already." Emma clutched her backpack, eyes wide. What if we can't get out?" Sam, nervously laughing, tried to brush it off. "It's a storm. These things happen. We'll wait it out." But another flash of lightning revealed something more sinister. The motel's windows weren't reflections anymore. Faces, pale and empty-eyed, staring back at them from the glass. They froze. Blocked escape. Minutes later, a deep crack of thunder shattered the air. Rain lashed sideways like needles. The wind roared, tearing branches from nearby trees and hurling them across the gravel. Jake slammed the door shut. "We can't drive through this." Outside, the dirt road leading down the ridge was now a river of mud, branches and debris. Large fallen trees blocked the way. The storm's fury drowned out all sound except the howling wind and the relentless hiss of rain. The group stood under the carport, soaked and trembling, their breath ragged. Lily screamed as something brushed her arm, a cold, dry tendril, like fingers of mist. She jerked back, eyes wide. "What the hell?" The tendril vanished instantly. Emma sobbed, wrapping herself in her jacket, eyes darting everywhere. "I knew this would happen. I knew we shouldn't stay." Chris, gripping the cold metal post, whispered, "It's not just the storm. The motel awakens." As the group hesitated, the motel seemed to change before their eyes. The flickering lights above the entrance dimmed until the bulbs glowed with a sickly green hue. The sign, Hollow Ridge Motel, swayed violently though no wind touched it. The windows darkened. Faces that weren't there moments ago now appeared, contorted, hollow-eyed, mouths stretched wide as if silently screaming. The air grew colder, carrying whispers on the wind. Stay, forever. The smell of wet stone shifted. Now it was a stench of rot, iron, and something sweet. Like flowers blooming over a grave. The building's structure seemed to pulse subtly, walls breathing in rhythm with the storm's growls. Locked inside. The group instinctively stepped back toward the lobby entrance, only to find it sealed by an unseen force. The door handle wouldn't turn. The glass panels vibrated softly, and the faces inside pressed closer, distorting with each flash of lightning. Jake yanked hard at the handle, his muscles straining. "It's stuck," he growled. It's like something's holding it shut." Sam, eyes darting, stammered, It's like it wants us inside." Emma clung to the doorframe, sobbing, "Please, let us out." Lily, fists pounding the glass, screamed, "Open, open!" But the door held firm, cold as stone. It sealed them inside. The motel's windows now pulsed with unnatural light, and the faces pressed against them, stretching, morphing into grotesque expressions of suffering. The group huddled together in the lobby, but fear crawled over them like insects, stripping away their composure. Night fell fast, and with it, the electricity failed. The lights go out. Without warning, the buzzing hum of the overhead fixtures cut out. The lobby plunged into total darkness. A heartbeat later, a flash of lightning lit the space, stark white, bone-sharp, freezing the motel's horrors into view for one terrifying moment before swallowing them back into blackness. The storm outside howled like a pack of wild beasts, thrashing against the building's walls and windows. Emma screamed as the lights died. Jake cursed under his breath, fumbling for his phone's flashlight, but the screen was dead. Lily's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. Sam laughed, but it was hollow and shaky. "Great. Perfect." Ash, the sound of breathing. The darkness wasn't silent. It breathed. A slow, wet inhalation, followed by a low exhalation, came from everywhere and nowhere. from the corners, from the walls, from inside their heads. The sound pressed against their ears, thick and suffocating. Chris clutched his arms around himself, whispering, It's everywhere. The breathing grew louder, faster, like something gathering strength. The walls watch. A faint greenish glow seeped from cracks in the plaster. The faces from the windows had multiplied. They weren't confined to the glass anymore. They crawled along the walls. Eyes without eyelids. Mouths stretched impossibly wide, frozen mid-scream. Hands pressed through plaster like trapped spirits trying to claw their way out. The group screamed and backed into the center of the room. The whispers become words. The whispers that once murmured unintelligibly began forming sentences, clear now but chilling. Stay. Feel the pain. Join us. The words curled around them like smoke, whispering directly into their ears. Emma collapsed to her knees, sobbing, rocking back and forth. Lily clawed at her own arms as if trying to tear the voices from her skin. Sam covered his ears but whimpered louder. The smell of rot. A new smell invaded the air. Thick, choking, rotting flesh, old blood. Damp earth turned over a grave. It wrapped around their lungs like a suffocating fog. Jake gagged and stumbled. Chris retched, his eyes wide with horror. The first apparition. From the far corner, where shadows pooled like spilled ink, something stirred. A figure emerged. Tall, bent, with limbs too long for its body, its head twisting unnaturally to look at each friend in turn. Its eyes were deep sockets filled with black voids, and its mouth stretched from ear to ear, dripping thick black ichor that hissed when it hit the floor. It didn't move like a living thing. It slid as if carried by the darkness itself. Lily screamed and bolted toward the stairs. Jake grabbed her arm. Emma collapsed, covering her face. Sam fell to the floor, trembling. The basement door screams. The basement door that had seemed locked earlier now groaned and screamed on its hinges, vibrating violently. The chains shattered as if made of paper, falling in pieces. The door swung open by itself with a long, drawn-out shriek, and from its depths poured cold, swirling mist. 1,000 hollow faces pushed through the fog, reaching with clawed hands, eyes burning with rage and sorrow. The air itself thickened, pulling at their clothes. The group split's panic overtook them. Jake, forcing himself to stay calm, shouted, "Stay together!" But the darkness warped sound, making his words drag and twist. Emma, eyes glazed with tears, bolted toward the hallway, screaming for her mother. Lily, hyperventilating, tried to follow, but vanished into the swirling shadows like she'd been swallowed whole. Sam, shaking uncontrollably, stumbled toward the windows, only to collapse as pale hands pressed through the glass, clawing at him with icy fingers. Chris, frozen, backed into the bookshelf. The books flew off the shelves as if invisible hands had thrown them, crashing around him. Jake lunged after Emma, but the hallway stretched unnaturally long, twisting, bending, a tunnel with walls that pulsed like muscle. He screamed her name as her figure stretched farther away, distorting like a reflection in water. Visions of death. The walls began to close in. Their shadows warped, twisting into monstrous versions of themselves, faces screaming, limbs bent at impossible angles. Emma screamed as she saw herself hanging from the ceiling, her eyes vacant. Lily sobbed as phantom hands clawed at her neck. Sam screamed in terror as mirrors shattered and fragments reflected dozens of twisted faces leering back. Chris whispered, "It's showing us." The final assault. The mist thickened into tendrils. They wrapped around limbs, dragging bodies toward corners where dark mouths gaped open in the walls. The breathing became deafening, vibrating through their bones. The whispers screamed now, "Stay forever! Feel the darkness! Join us!" The storm had passed sometime during the night, but its aftermath clung to the motel like a thick, wet shroud. The air was colder than it should have been, sharp with the scent of iron and damp stone. Even the silence felt wrong, too heavy, too expectant, like the world was holding its breath. Jake stirred first, his eyes fluttering open to dim shapes. The motel room's cracked ceiling swam before him, its corners darker than normal, as if shadows pooled there long after sunrise. His skin prickled with cold. His shirt was clammy, sticking to his chest, sticky with sweat and something else. Sour, metallic. He swung his legs off the bed and touched the floor. It was icy, colder than tile ever should be. His hand lingered for a moment, frozen. Emma groaned beside him. Her face was pale and blotched red from dried tears. She rubbed at her temples, her fingers trembling as though trying to erase the memories that clung to her brain like cobwebs. Sam lay crumpled near the wall, his lips cracked, eyes darting beneath his eyelids as if nightmares still clawed at him. His breath rasped, shallow and uneven. Chris sat pressed against the corner, knees pulled tight, eyes glazed over like glass. His lips moved soundlessly, forming prayers or apologies. Lily stirred near the window, curls damp against her cheeks. She sat up with a gasp, eyes wide, pupils dilated. Her hands clutched at the blanket as though it could hold her back from something reaching for her. For a long moment, none of them moved. The only sound was the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe, slow, hollow, like a heartbeat in a coffin. Jake's voice, hoarse and unsure, broke the silence. It's over. Emma's eyes filled instantly with tears. We made it. Sam forced a weak laugh that caught in his throat. Storm's gone. I guess we survived. The relief washed over them like a temporary balm. Shoulders sagged, breath deepened. Their eyes, though haunted, began to refocus on the mundane. By the time the clock on the desk limped toward late morning, the group had gathered in the lobby. The faded carpet felt strangely soft under their damp shoes. Dust motes floated in the beams of sunlight creeping through the curtains, turning lazily like motes trapped in amber. The overhead lights hummed softly, steady now, though their glow seemed dimmer than it should have been. The smell of rot from the night before had receded, replaced by damp plaster, mold, and old wood. Still, something faint lingered underneath, sour and metallic, as if rust and blood had soaked deep into the walls. Jake stood rigid by the door, jaw tight, hands clenched into fists that trembled ever so slightly. His eyes flicked toward each of them as if to reassure himself they were real. "We're getting out of here," he rasped, his voice tight but determined. Emma, eyes red-rimmed but resolute, nodded. "Yes, please. I can't. I won't stay here." Sam rubbed his face with trembling fingers, forcing his lips into a thin smile. "Let's just leave, before anything else." Lily's lips quivered, but she nodded, staring at the door as if it were a portal back to safety. Chris's gaze lingered on the floor, tracing cracks with his eyes. "We have to go," he whispered. Without further argument, Jake strode toward the entrance, his hand reaching for the brass handle. The others followed, their feet crunching softly against the faded tile. The handle turned with smooth precision, almost unnaturally effortless. For a breathless second, the door hung open, inviting them into the light, and then it slammed wide. The sunlight blasted into the lobby, a harsh white glare that seemed too bright after the heavy gloom of the night. The group froze. Outside, the parking lot was a nightmare. The asphalt was slick with rainwater that reflected flashing red and blue lights like blood smeared across glass. An ambulance stood parked crookedly, its emergency lights spinning in frantic pulses, casting warped shadows across the motel's exterior walls. Police cars lined the edge of the lot, their sirens silent now, but their presence screaming. Stretchers lay scattered in the wet grass. White sheets covered bodies arranged with cold, bureaucratic precision. 1, 2, 3. Too many to count at first glance. The smell hit them next. A choking wave of iron and decay, thick and rank, rolled into the lobby like a physical force. It clawed at their throats and nostrils, forcing them to gag. Their stomachs twisted as bile surged. Jake staggered back, clutching his chest. Emma's breath hitched, her eyes locked on the closest stretcher, widening with horror. Sam swayed, his mouth hanging open. No. Lily's legs buckled and she fell to her knees, hands grasping at the ground like it might drag her in. Chris's eyes went glassy with terror. His lips parted, but no sound came. The sheets stirred. For a fraction of a second, one corner lifted on its own, as if an unseen hand nudged it. The shape beneath it, the curve of a shoulder, the hollow line of a jaw, a face turned slightly toward them. Their eyes froze on it. Their own faces stared back at them. Pale, still, eyelids half lowered, mouths slack. The sheets fluttered again, caressed by nothing but the wind. The flashing lights distorted the edges of the forms, stretching them like wax figures melting in slow motion. Before any of them could scream, the whisper returned. At first it drifted on the breeze, soft, distant, then it coiled around their ears like icy breath. "You are forever stuck here." The words didn't shout, they caressed. They caressed with cruelty, like fingers dragging through wet cloth, persistent and intimate. The brightness of the world dimmed as if the sunlight itself was retreating. The edges of the parking lot shimmered, bending unnaturally. The motel's walls seemed to pulse, breathing in rhythm with their rising panic. The air thickened, heavy with rot and mildew, sticky and suffocating. Jake's eyes bulged, frozen in disbelief. Emma clutched her face as though trying to shield herself from the revelation. Sam whimpered, covering his ears, but the whispers seeped through his fingers like smoke. Lily's scream caught in her throat, unable to escape. Chris whispered, voice barely audible, "No." The covered bodies no longer looked like strangers. They looked like themselves. Every feature perfectly still, every eye dull and lifeless, a grotesque mirror of the living, robbed of warmth and breath. The world lurched. The sunlight bled out. The motel's interior seemed to stretch like a mouth opening wide to swallow them whole. The whispers spiraled into a chorus of pleas, threats, and promises of eternal torment. And the ground beneath them seemed to pulse with unseen hands, reaching, clawing, hungry. They stood on the threshold, alive, but already claimed. The horror that had chased them through the storm now waited patiently, ready to drag them into its eternal embrace. The realization hit them all at once, a blow heavier than thunder, sharper than lightning. Their eyes locked on the sheet-covered bodies outside, and the world tilted. No more confusion, no more denial. They were dead. The cold slammed into them like ice water poured down their spines. The metallic tang of blood and wet earth thickened in their mouths, tasting bitter, coppery, as if they had licked it themselves. The sunlight drained from the world. The edges of the room wavered, bending like heat ripples, then darkened into shades of green and grey. Their breathing hitched, sharp and panicked. Every exhale fogged the air like smoke. The whispers swelled, now louder, surrounding them on every side. Join us. Feel it. Forever. The words weren't distant anymore. They crawled across their skin, curling around their necks, sliding down their spines like freezing hands. Goosebumps rose in patches across their bodies like cold worms wriggling through their flesh. The motel's walls shuddered. The framed photographs of landscapes trembled on their hooks, falling one by one, each crash echoing like a gunshot in the hollow space. The hallway stretched, narrowing until it was a tunnel lined with pale faces pressed into plaster, eyes wide, mouths screaming silently. The floor beneath their feet shivered, rising and sinking like a slow heartbeat. Jake's fingers twitched uncontrollably. His eyes darted toward the entrance again and again, as if pleading for escape, but the door now seemed miles away, warped and unreachable. Emma's lips quivered as tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the sweat and dust on her skin, leaving thin trails of grime. She clutched at the air like it could hold her in place. Lily's breathing grew ragged, shallow, every inhale scraping her throat raw. Her fingers clawed at the floor until her nails bent painfully. Sam's eyes rolled back, his body jerking as phantom fingers traced icy lines down his spine. He whimpered like a trapped animal, unable to speak. Chris sat motionless, eyes hollow, mouth slack, frozen between pleading and surrender. The sheets outside fluttered violently in the windless air. For a split second, the corners lifted fully. Beneath them, their own faces, pale, drained, twisted in terror, stared at them. The sight was unbearable. It was them, not an illusion. Not a trick. The cold air slammed into them with the weight of 1,000 tombs opening at once. Their legs buckled. Their knees struck the floor with a dull, sick thud. But they couldn't move away. The room's temperature plummeted. Frost spread along the windows, curling like veins of ice that pulsed and crawled inward. Their fingertips numbed, lips turned blue, breath fogged in great plumes like ghostly clouds. The floor beneath them rippled, as if breathing, rising and falling, pulling at their ankles with invisible claws. The walls began to ooze. Dark streaks, like blood and oil mixed together, seeped from cracks and corners, flowing toward them slowly, thick and viscous. The smell deepened. Rot, wet earth, cold iron, and something sweet and sickly like flowers blooming on a grave. The whispers grew into screams. Not screams of pain, but of longing, desperate, ravenous, insistent. Come, feel the emptiness, stay. The sound pressed against their ears so hard it seemed to vibrate inside their skulls. Their heads throbbed in rhythm with it. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness fell. But the motel no longer needed lights. The darkness itself became alive, shapes moving within it, eyes gleaming like knives, mouths opening without sound. Cold tendrils, thin as smoke and sharp as claws, snaked from the walls toward their skin. They brushed arms, faces, necks. Wherever they touched, their skin froze instantly, puckered and pale, as if drained of warmth. The basement door groaned open by itself. Mist poured out like a living thing. Inside the swirling vapor, dozens of shadowy forms writhed, their shapes half-formed, twisting between man and beast, bone and smoke. The air thickened until it was hard to breathe. It felt like the motel itself had lungs, expanding, contracting, sucking the last remnants of life from the air. Jake tried to scream, but no sound came. Emma clutched at his arm, but her fingers passed through his flesh like mist. Lily's eyes glazed over entirely as the mist curled around her face, erasing her features. Sam's mouth opened wide, but his voice was swallowed whole. Chris's eyes rolled back until only white showed, and his head lolled to the side as invisible hands gripped his jaw. The sheets outside began to ripple like living skin. The pale forms beneath twitched, one sheet lifted fully. A skeletal hand, white and clawed, reached out through the slit, curling toward them. The cold wasn't cold anymore. It was hunger. It crawled into their bones, sinking deeper with every breath. The motel whispered one last time. Forever. The air around them thickened to the point where movement felt impossible. Their limbs froze, their muscles locked, their eyes glazed as darkness crawled across their skin like ink spreading through water. One by one, their faces slackened. Their eyes lost focus. Their mouths parted as if begging for air that would never come again. The last sensation they felt wasn't pain. It was the eerie calm of surrender. The motel embraced them. Its walls pulsed softly, like a living organism swallowing them whole. The whispers softened into lullabies of despair. The faces in the plaster smiled, satisfied. The tendrils wrapped around their bodies, pulling them into the mist with practiced hunger. The sheets outside settled again, smoothing over hollow shapes, their shapes. The storm's aftermath gave way to stillness once more. But inside Hollow Ridge Motel, the lost souls sat waiting, eyes vacant, limbs frozen, forever trapped between breath and void, ready to lure the next travelers into its cold embrace. And somewhere deep within the darkness, the motel exhaled, patient, hungry, eternal. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create even more terrifying tales to keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay brave.